Let me in, I'll reward you. Her promise would change everything. The wind blew like fire across Red Mesa, turning the wide, red plains into a sea of dust and grit. Small settlements dotted the landscape, little more than metal shacks and solar panels scattered across the scarred earth. In one such isolated spot, a lone ranger named Cade lived in a sturdy ranch home built from old salvaged materials and reinforced alloys. Cade was a man of routine and quiet habits. He rose with the twin suns, repaired fences, maintained his solar rails, and kept the small herd of solar sheep grazing along the hills. Violence and chaos rarely touched him here, and that was exactly the way he liked it. That evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon and shadows stretched long across the canyon, the wind began to howl. Dust swirled into mini tornadoes, whistling across the rocks. Cade had just finished repairing a broken solar panel when a faint light flickered near his outer fence. He squinted against the storm, wondering if it was another stray trader lost in the storm. But there was no vehicle, no sound of engines, just a small figure moving quickly hunched against the wind. "Who's out there?" Cade called, his voice steady but sharp. He grabbed his plasma revolver, one of the old but reliable models, and cautiously stepped toward the fence. The figure hesitated, then called out in a strange, musical voice. "Please let me in. I'll reward you." Cade froze. He had heard these words before many times, and never once did they lead to anything good. Bandits, bounty hunters, desperate travelers all used the promise of reward to trick someone into helping. Yet something about her voice struck a chord deep in his gut. It was not greedy, not commanding. It was tired, frightened, real. He waited a moment, measuring his instincts. Then slowly he opened the reinforced door to the ranch. The wind rushed inside, carrying grit and the scent of ozone. She stumbled in immediately, and Cade caught her before she fell. Her form was slender but not weak. She was unlike any human he had ever seen. Her skin glimmered faintly under the dim lights, with a smooth, almost metallic sheen in places. Her eyes glowed silver, small pupils darting around as if scanning every detail. Her clothes were torn and scorched in several spots, evidence of recent battles. Cade placed her on a worn couch, reaching for a towel to wipe her off. "Who are you, and why are you out in this storm alone?" he asked, voice calm but alert. "I am Leora," she said, her words clipped and careful. "I am being hunted." Cade raised an eyebrow. "Hunted by whom?" "Hunters from my own people," she whispered, leaning closer. "They want what I carry, they want it badly. If they take it, countless worlds may suffer. I cannot let them." Cade frowned. He had seen enough danger in his life to recognize fear and desperation when it came. He had also seen the deadliest storms and the harshest mercenaries. Yet something about her, the raw honesty in her gaze, made him pause. "I can't fight your wars for you," Cade said carefully, "but you can stay here until the storm passes." Leora nodded, relief washing over her features. "Thank you. I do not ask for more, only shelter, only for tonight." As Cade moved to light the fire, the soft hum of scanners on the roof picked up distant movement. Small blips flashed across his display, multiple ships approaching from the east. "Storm or not, you've brought company," he muttered under his breath. He explained to Leora, "You've got trackers on you. Whatever you're carrying, it's valuable, and it's dangerous. I can't just sit here. They'll follow you right to my doorstep." Leora's silver eyes widened. "I feared this. I thought I could escape." "They'll be here soon," Cade said, checking the old laser turrets mounted around the ranch. "We need a plan, and fast. Can you tell me what you're carrying?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Not yet. It's too dangerous. If I reveal it now, they might know where I am." "I trust you only because I have no choice." Cade grunted. He understood. Secrets and survival often walked hand in hand. "Then we prepare. You stay inside. I'll handle the rest." Minutes passed, and the wind slammed against the reinforced walls like the hammer of some giant. Through the thick storm, faint shadows appeared over the ridge. Cade moved silently, taking his revolver and scanning the canyon. There were at least 3 ships descending slowly, almost hovering, their anti-grav engines muffled by the storm but still noticeable. Cade sighed. "You wanted a reward, huh?" he muttered to Leora, who watched from inside. "Well, this is going to cost more than you thought." He activated the ranch's old defense mechanisms. Laser turrets rotating into position, energy nets spanning the perimeter, and motion sensors primed to alert him to any breach. This was not new. Cade had fortified this place over years against raiders, mercenaries, and wandering predators. But this was different. The threat was alive, precise, and patient. Inside, Leora moved closer to the fire, her hands trembling. "You do not know what you are facing," she said softly. "They do not fight like humans. They think in patterns and probabilities. They cannot be outsmarted in ways you know." Cade watched her, studying her closely. "Then maybe you should tell me what it is," he said. "If it's that dangerous, I need to know what I'm defending." Leora hesitated, then drew a small, black object from her cloak. It was about the size of a human fist, but its surface shimmered in a strange pattern, like liquid silver frozen in motion. "This is the device. It can change worlds," she whispered. "In the wrong hands, it could destroy life on countless planets." Cade felt the weight of the moment. He had dealt with weapons, alien tech, and dangerous cargo before, but nothing that carried the fate of worlds in such a small package. His life of quiet ranch work had never prepared him for this. Outside, the first ship hovered low, and figures in sleek armored suits descended, scanning the storm with luminous visors. The wind tore at Cade's cloak as he crouched behind a turret, waiting for the right moment. He knew this fight would not be simple. They had advanced technology, superior firepower, and the element of surprise. But he had one advantage. He knew the land, its hidden paths, and its secrets. As the storm raged, Leora stepped forward. "I can help," she said, her voice firm. "I know how they operate. If we work together, we might have a chance." Cade nodded slowly. "Then work with me. We defend this place until the storm passes, and then we figure out how to get you and that thing out safely." She smiled faintly, a spark of hope breaking through the exhaustion. "I promised you a reward," she said. "I did not mean money or glory, I meant trust, and now perhaps that is something worth more than anything else." The storm's roar seemed to respond, winds bending and twisting the red sands, as if acknowledging the fragile alliance forming inside the small ranch. Cade adjusted his stance, feeling the familiar steadiness return. He had faced raiders, desert storms, and alien scavengers before. But this was something different, something bigger, something that might change everything he knew about the frontier. And as the first lights of the enemy ships cut through the crimson haze, Cade whispered to himself, "Well, Leora, let's see if we're ready for what's coming." The storm had not lessened, but Cade and Leora knew they could not wait passively. The enemy was advancing, their ships glowing faintly through the red haze. Cade checked the perimeter one last time, making sure the motion sensors and energy nets were ready. The ranch, though sturdy, was no fortress against organized attackers, but it was all he had. Leora's eyes scanned the horizon through the reinforced window. "They are precise," she said. "They will not rush blindly. They will test, probe, and try to force a reaction. We must think ahead." Cade nodded. "Then we'll do exactly that. I know this land better than anyone. We make them follow our rules, not theirs." For hours they watched. The first scouts approached, moving silently through the dust. Cade activated a series of laser tripwires, old but effective, that ran along narrow paths where the enemy would likely advance. Sparks erupted as the first scout triggered a wire, throwing them off balance. Cade could see the glowing visors scanning, trying to anticipate traps, but the storm worked in his favor. Visibility was poor, wind whipping sand into their sensors and disrupting their communications. Leora moved beside him, adjusting her own scanners. "We can use the tunnels," she suggested. "Ancient miners left a network under the canyon. Few know the paths. We can trap them." Cade's mind worked quickly. The tunnels were a relic from an old frontier mining operation, abandoned decades ago. Only a few maps survived, and Cade had memorized them while exploring as a boy. "Good," he said. "We lure them near the canyon, then force them underground. There they lose their advantage." By the time the first wave was pushed back, both of them were breathing heavily. Cade's arms ached from operating the turret systems, and Leora's face was streaked with dust. Yet a silent satisfaction passed between them. They had held the line. The enemy had not expected resistance from such a small ranch. They paused, catching their breath, and Leora studied the device in her hands. "This," she whispered, "is not a weapon, not in the way they imagine. It can change worlds, restore them. But if misused, it can destroy everything. That is why they hunt me." Cade frowned. "Change worlds how?" "Terraforming, yes, but more than that," she explained. "It can repair planets, bring life to barren lands, or reshape ecosystems. But if you push it too far, too fast, chaos follows." Cade glanced at the glowing silver cube. "Sounds like too much power for anyone to carry alone." "Exactly," she said softly, "and I cannot let it fall into their hands. I've seen what greed and fear can do." The wind shrieked outside, a constant reminder that time was slipping away. Cade checked the scanners again. More coming, not just scouts this time, they're sending enforcers. Leora's eyes narrowed. Then it's time to move, we cannot fight all of them here. The canyon is our only chance. I know the paths, follow me and we use every trick we can. With the storm lashing at them, they slipped out a side door. Cade carried a pack of tools and weapons while Leora clutched the device. The ground beneath their feet was loose, sand and rocks sliding with every step. Cade led her through narrow ridges and secret paths, the kind that only a lifelong frontier survivor would know. As they approached the canyon entrance, they heard the first enemy hovercraft descending. Its lights cut through the red haze and its engines hummed a low, threatening note. Cade gestured for Leora to duck, and together they slipped behind a ridge. "Here," Cade whispered. "We split their forces, draw them in and then the tunnels." Leora nodded, understanding immediately. They were no longer simply defending a ranch, they were setting a trap. Cade stepped into view, firing his plasma revolver in controlled bursts. The shots hit the ground near the hovercrafts, forcing the enforcers to pause. Sparks flew as their sensors adjusted. From the ridge, Cade could see panic flicker across their glowing visors. They were trained, but not prepared for tactics that relied on the environment. "Now," Cade shouted, and they slipped down into the canyon entrance, hidden by shadows and storm. The enemy, eager to secure the device, followed blindly into the narrow tunnels. Inside, the canyon was a labyrinth of ancient mining paths. Low ceilings, twisting corridors, and sudden drops created a perfect defensive maze. Cade led Leora through the passages, pausing to set small, improvised traps. Rocks were precariously balanced over narrow ledges, ready to tumble, and wires connected to old mining lights would flash to disorient the enemy. The first of their pursuers entered, only to be thrown off balance by Cade's clever traps. Sparks flew and alarms rang, though the narrow tunnels muffled the sound outside. Leora moved quickly, placing devices that jammed communications. "They cannot call for reinforcements from here," she said. "This is our advantage." The battle inside the tunnels was tense. They moved silently, striking from shadows, retreating before the enemy could react. Cade used his knowledge of the paths to funnel them, forcing the enforcers into dead ends where traps could incapacitate them without harm. The air smelled of dust, metal, and the faint ozone from energy weapons. Through it all, Leora watched Cade closely. She had expected humans to act selfishly, to seek reward immediately, to demand power. Yet this man, this quiet cowboy, acted with patience, restraint, and ingenuity. Every move was calculated, yet humane. She realized then that her promise of reward had been unnecessary. His honor, his instinct to protect, was worth more than anything she could offer. Hours passed and the storm began to weaken. Outside, the dust settled slightly, revealing the scarred canyon walls. Inside, Cade and Leora paused in a small cavern, catching their breath. The device glimmered softly, a steady reminder of the stakes. "They are learning," Leora said, her voice quiet. "They are adapting to the traps." Cade nodded. "Then we adapt too. They think this is a simple chase, but we know the terrain. We have the advantage if we keep our wits about us." Leora studied him, surprised at his calm demeanor. "You are not afraid?" Cade shrugged. "Afraid keeps you alive, but panic kills you. I've seen enough dust storms, raiders, and mercenaries to know how to survive, and I've learned that some battles are not fought with weapons alone." Her silver eyes softened. I misjudged humans, especially you," Cade grinned faintly. "Misjudged or underestimated, big difference." They continued through the tunnels, deeper into the maze, knowing that every step bought them time. Time to plan, time to survive, and time to understand the strange alliance forming between them. By nightfall, they reached a hidden alcove, one that Cade had discovered years ago while exploring the old mines. It was small but defensible, with only one entrance that could be watched and protected. They paused, finally taking a moment to rest. "I owe you nothing," Leora whispered, clutching the device close. "And yet I feel that I am learning something from you." Cade sat on a ledge, scanning the dimly lit tunnels. "Learning never stops out here. The frontier teaches you every day. Sometimes it's survival, sometimes it's trust, and sometimes it's knowing when to fight and when to wait." Leora nodded, understanding. In a world filled with storms, both literal and political, trust was a rare and valuable commodity. Cade had earned it simply by acting as he always had, steady, patient, and honorable. Outside, the wind finally began to calm, the storm retreating over the horizon. But their fight was far from over. The enemy was not defeated, they were only delayed. Cade knew that the coming hours would test every skill, every tactic, and every ounce of courage they possessed. Yet, for the first time, Leora felt hope. Not because of a promised reward, but because of the man who had taken her in, defended her, and trusted her. A cowboy in a strange land, a guardian of the frontier, who refused to be swayed by fear, greed, or deception. And in that moment, as the soft glow of the alien device illuminated the small cavern, they both understood that the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm they were about to face together. The hidden alcove offered a brief respite, but Cade knew it would not last. The enemy was not merely patient, they were relentless. Through Leora's scanners, he could see the faint shimmer of energy signatures moving cautiously toward the canyon entrance. The hunters had adapted to their traps, moving with care, calculating each step as if the land itself was against them. "We cannot hold them forever," Cade said, resting against the cool stone wall. "We need a plan that ends this, not just delays it." Leora's silver eyes flickered with thought. "There is a plateau ahead, a wide mesa with narrow access points. If we lure them there, we can control the battlefield. I can assist with the device's sensors to predict their moves." Cade nodded. "Then that's where we go. But we must draw them in first, make them believe they are chasing shadows." By nightfall, the storm had fully passed. The red mesa under twin moons glowed eerily, crimson sands reflecting pale silver light. Cade and Leora slipped out of the tunnel network, moving silently toward the plateau. The enemy ships hovered above, sending down small scout drones that probed for life forms. Cade fired sporadically, using controlled bursts to trigger early warning alarms in the drones, forcing the scouts to retreat into the storm of dust stirred by their own engines. "This way," Cade whispered, leading Leora over a narrow ridge. "They'll think we're running blindly." Leora's gaze lingered on him. "You are unlike anyone I have known. You act without thinking of reward, without fear." Cade smirked. "That's a cowboy. Fear keeps you alive, but it doesn't make you reckless, and I don't need a reward to do the right thing." They reached the plateau just as the first of the enemy forces entered the canyon below. Cade set traps along the narrow access points. Rocks balanced to tumble, energy nets hidden beneath the sand, and old laser turrets he had reprogrammed for remote activation. Leora placed small devices around the plateau, sensors that could anticipate enemy movements. "If we time it right, we can force them into the traps without risking ourselves too much," she said. Cade studied the horizon. The first hovercraft descended, landing with a low hum. Figures emerged, armored and precise, their glowing visors scanning every ridge. Cade's heart pounded not from fear, but from the focus of the moment. Every trap, every plan depended on timing. As the enemy advanced, Cade and Leora moved along hidden paths, observing and adjusting their strategy. They struck in bursts, forcing the soldiers to split and fall into preset traps. The rocks tumbled, energy nets activated, and the enemy was disoriented. Yet they adapted quickly, using jetpacks and advanced sensors to avoid some traps. "They are learning faster than I expected," Cade muttered. "We need something more drastic." Leora stepped forward, holding the device. "There is a way to amplify its sensors temporarily. I can create a signal that disrupts their communications. They won't know who is real and who is not." Cade hesitated. "Are you sure it won't damage the land?" "Not if we keep it brief," Leora said. "Just long enough to give us the advantage." Cade nodded. "Do it." The device pulsed, sending a faint hum through the air. Enemy sensors flickered, communications garbled. Confusion spread among the ranks, and Cade seized the opportunity. With precise timing, he triggered the remaining traps, forcing the enemy into tight corridors where they could be contained without harm. For a moment, the plateau was quiet. Dust hung in the air, reflecting moonlight. Cade and Leora crouched behind a rock, watching the chaos unfold. "You did it," Leora whispered. "We did it," Cade corrected. "Together." Her gaze softened. "I misjudged humans. I expected selfishness, greed, manipulation. You are different. You act for what is right, not for gain." Cade smiled faintly. "And I misjudged you once. I thought this device was a simple tool, something that could be destroyed or used. But it is more. It is hope or danger, depending on the hands it falls into." As they spoke, a new energy signature appeared on Leora's scanner, a larger, more advanced ship hovering beyond the ridge. Its engines were silent, but the pulse of its sensors was unmistakable. "They saved their best for last," Cade muttered. Leora's silver eyes widened. "That is not just another hunter. That is the leader. They control the others, and they know we are here." Cade's jaw tightened. "Then it's time to finish this. We cannot run anymore. We take the fight to them." They moved quickly along the plateau, using shadows and the terrain for cover. Cade activated hidden turrets remotely, striking the leader's hovercraft with precise energy bursts. Sparks and smoke erupted, forcing it to land prematurely. Cade and Leora approached cautiously, every step measured. The leader emerged tall, imposing, and armored with sleek metal that reflected the twin moons. Its visor glowed red, scanning for life forms. Leora stepped forward, holding the device. "Stop this!" she shouted. "You cannot have it. You do not understand what you carry." The leader raised a hand, activating a small shield that deflected her warning pulse. "You are irrelevant," it said, voice modulated and cold. "Give the device and you may live, resist, and your world suffer." Cade stepped beside Leora, revolver raised. "You underestimate humans, and you underestimate trust. That is your mistake." The leader advanced, calculating their every movement. Cade and Leora moved as one, using the terrain, traps, and surprise to stay ahead. The leader's soldiers tried to intervene, but they were slowed by the remnants of previous traps and the terrain advantage of the plateau. In the chaos, Leora realized that activating the device fully could end the threat, but risked environmental damage if misused. She looked at Cade. "I need to trust you. We can do this together. Are you ready?" Cade nodded. "Always." Together, they activated the device, sending a controlled pulse that disrupted the leader's systems, temporarily disabling armor and weapons. The soldiers faltered, and the leader staggered, unprepared for the combined ingenuity of human tactics and alien technology. With a final, coordinated move, Cade and Leora forced the enemy to retreat. The leader, realizing defeat, ordered a withdrawal, disappearing beyond the ridge with its remaining forces. Silence fell across the plateau, broken only by the wind brushing across red sands. Cade lowered his revolver, exhausted but steady. "That should keep them away for now." Leora studied him, admiration clear in her eyes. "You are more than I expected, Cade. I promised a reward, yet it seems I have received the greatest reward myself, trust, and perhaps hope." Cade looked out at the horizon. "Hope is all we have in this frontier, but it is fragile. Stronger together, maybe, we can protect it." The twin moons reflected off the device, which glimmered faintly in Leora's hands. They had survived the storm, the hunters, and the leader's attack. But the device was still dangerous, and the threat of those who would misuse it remained. As they set up a temporary camp on the plateau, Cade realized that the quiet life he had once known was gone. Leora had brought more than danger. She had brought change. And perhaps in her company he could embrace it. Together, they watched the distant horizon, knowing that their fight was not over, but also knowing that they had the strength, skill, and trust to face whatever came next. For the first time in years, Cade felt that the frontier was not just a place to survive, but a place where courage, loyalty, and trust could shape the future. And somewhere in the quiet of the plateau, under the twin moons, the seeds of a new alliance were planted, one that might one day change the fate of worlds. The night was quiet over Red Mesa. The twin moons cast pale light across the plateau, illuminating the red sand and jagged rocks. Cade and Leora had set up a temporary camp, but neither of them rested easily. The device still glimmered softly in Leora's hands, a constant reminder of the power it held and the danger it carried. "We can't stay here forever," Cade said, sharpening a tool he had repurposed as a defensive weapon. "They'll come back. They always do." Leora nodded, her silver eyes reflecting the moonlight. "I know, and next time they will bring everything they have. We need a permanent solution, not just to survive, but to make sure no one misuses this." Cade paused, studying her. "You mean use it?" She looked at him solemnly. "Yes, but carefully. If I release the device's energy across the canyon, we can disable their ships and sensors temporarily. It will buy us time and ensure no lives are lost, but we have to be precise. Too much, and the land itself could suffer." Cade nodded. He trusted her judgment. She had survived more than he could imagine, and her knowledge of the device was unmatched. Together, they could face whatever came next. They moved to the edge of the plateau, hidden behind jagged rocks. From there, they could see the valley below, the canyon that led to the old settlements. The enemy had regrouped in small numbers, cautious but persistent. Cade scanned the terrain. Every trap, every trick they had prepared before had delayed the hunters, but now they needed a decisive move. Leora extended the device, her hands steady. When I activate it, you'll need to cover the sides. Make sure no one approaches too close. The pulse will last only a few minutes, but it will create confusion, enough for us to act. Cade nodded. Understood. She activated the device. A faint hum rose into the air, almost musical, and then a pulse of energy radiated outward. Drones in the canyon faltered, sensors scrambled, and the enemy soldiers stumbled as their communications failed. Cade took advantage, triggering hidden traps along the narrow canyon passes. Rocks tumbled, energy nets activated, and small explosives created loud diversions. The enemy could not coordinate, they were forced into chaotic movements. This is it, Cade whispered. Now we push. They moved swiftly through the plateau's hidden paths, descending toward the canyon. The enemy was disoriented, unable to communicate. Cade used every skill he had learned as a frontier ranger. Timing, terrain, patience. They guided the hunters into narrow passages where the traps were strongest, ensuring that no one could reach them directly. As they advanced, the leader emerged from a hovercraft that had survived the initial pulse. Its red visor glowed with anger. "You think this will stop us?" it shouted, its voice echoing across the canyon. "The device will be mine, you cannot hide." Cade stepped forward, revolver in hand, his stance calm but resolute. "You underestimate humans, and you underestimate trust. That is your mistake." Leora moved beside him, her hands steady on the device. "We can end this without killing anyone, but you must leave, now." The leader hesitated, calculating. Its soldiers struggled against the traps and the confusing signals from the device. It realized that brute force would no longer work. Cade and Leora had the advantage: terrain, traps, and ingenuity. The leader finally signaled retreat, its soldiers following. Hovercrafts lifted awkwardly into the air, engines straining against the canyon winds, and disappeared over the horizon. The plateau fell silent once more. Cade lowered his revolver, feeling the exhaustion settle in his muscles. Leora exhaled, relief washing over her features. "It's over for now." Cade glanced at her, admiration in his eyes. "You fought well, not just with the device, but with your mind." "I've seen many people chase power, but you controlled it." Leora smiled faintly. "I promised a reward," she said softly. "I thought it would be something tangible, money, status, influence, but what I have learned is trust is far more valuable, and you have earned it." Cade shrugged. "Trust is the only thing that lasts out here. The rest is dust." The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of the desert night. For a moment, the plateau was peaceful, almost serene. Cade and Leora set up a small fire, warming themselves against the cold. The device lay between them, its glow soft but steady. "We should decide what to do next," Cade said. "You cannot stay here indefinitely, and I cannot move too far from the frontier, but we have formed an alliance. Perhaps we can protect the device together for the right reasons." Leora considered him, her silver eyes thoughtful. "Yes, together, but carefully. The frontier is harsh, and there will be others who seek this power. We must be vigilant." Cade nodded. "Then we watch, we wait, and we act when necessary. That's the life out here, and somehow I think I can handle that, with you." They shared a quiet moment, the glow of the fire reflecting in their eyes. For the first time, Leora felt a sense of belonging. She had been hunted, alone, and desperate. Now she had someone she could trust, someone who understood courage, patience, and honor. In the distance, the settlements of Red Mesa slept, unaware of the battle that had unfolded above them. The frontier was still dangerous, filled with storms, raiders, and unknown threats. But for Cade and Leora, it had also become a place of possibility, a place where trust, courage, and ingenuity could shape the future. The night deepened. The twin moons illuminated the desert in pale silver, casting long shadows across the rocks and sand. Cade and Leora sat near the fire, speaking in low tones, planning for what might come next. "We have survived the storm," Cade said, "and we have survived the hunters. But this device, it is not something the world can ignore. One day someone else will come, someone who does not understand restraint or honor." Leora nodded. "Then we prepare and we protect it, not for reward, not for power, but for life, for the frontier. For all the worlds that could be affected." Cade smiled faintly. "Then it's settled. We watch, we wait, and we act together." The desert wind whispered around them, carrying the scent of red earth and distant stone. The plateau, scarred by the battle, stood silent and still. Cade and Leora knew that the frontier would always test them. It would bring storms, threats, and challenges beyond imagination. But they also knew that they could face them, not alone, but together. As dawn approached, the first light touched the plateau. Red Mesa glowed in warm hues and the winds began to calm. Cade looked at Leora, seeing hope reflected in her eyes. "The frontier is not just a place to survive," he said. "It's a place to live, to fight for what's right, and maybe to build something new." Leora smiled. "Yes, something new, together." And with that, they prepared to descend from the plateau, moving toward the canyon below. The device, the source of so much danger and hope, remained safe between them. The enemy had been defeated, at least for now, but the future was wide open. New threats, new adventures, and new challenges awaited on the frontier. Yet Cade and Leora faced them without fear. They had trust, skill, and courage. They had each other. And for the first time, the frontier seemed not just wild and dangerous, but full of possibility. The wind carried their resolve across Red Mesa. And somewhere in the distance, over the scarlet plains and jagged ridges, another dust storm began to form. A reminder that the frontier never truly rested, and neither would those who called it home. But Cade and Leora were ready. Together, they would face whatever came next. And whatever the galaxy might throw at them, they knew they had the strength, the courage, and the bond to survive, and to protect the future of the frontier and the worlds beyond.